Stupid Cupid, you're a real mean guy. I'd like to clip your wings so you can fly. I'm in love and it's a crying shame. And I know that you're the one to blame. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. 8:30. I'm acting like a lovesick fool. You've even got me carrying his books to school. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. You mixed me up for good right from the very start. Hey, go play Robin Hood with somebody else's heart. You got me jumping like a crazy clown, and I don't feature what you're putting down. Since I kissed his loving lips and wine, the thing that bothers me is that I like it fine. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. You got me jumping like a crazy creature, what you putting down. Since I kissed his loving lips and wine, the thing that bothers me is that I like it fine. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. Hey, hey. Stupid Cupid, you're a real mean guy. I'd like to clip your wings so you can fly. I'm in love and it's a crying shame. And I know that you're the one to blame. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. I can't do my homework and I can't think straight. I need 'em every morning about 8:30. I'm acting like a lovesick fool. You've even got me carrying his books to school. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. You mixed me up for good right from the very start. Hey, go play Robin Hood with somebody else's heart. You got me jumping like a crazy clown, and I don't feature what you put. Since I live and wine, the thing that makes me like it fine. Hey, set me free. You got me jumping like a crazy clown, and I don't feature what you're putting down. Since I kissed his loving lips and wine, the thing that bothers me is that I like it fine. Hey, hey, speak free. Stupid, stop it on me. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. I'm acting like a lovesick fool. You've even got me carrying his books to school. Hey, hey, you set me free. Good right from the very start. Hey, go play Robin Hood with somebody else's heart. You got me jumping like a crazy clown. And I don't treat you what you put down. Didn't get to listen to the thing that free. Stupid you. You got me jumping like a crazy clown, and I don't feature what you're putting down. Since I kissed your loving lips and wine, the thing that bothers me is that I like it fine. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. Hey, hey, stupid Cupid, stop picking on me.
Used to before, and I can't sweep you off of your feet. Will your mouth still remember the taste of my love? Will your eyes still smile? Will be loving than see? And baby, my heart could still fall as hard at 23. And I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. Maybe just the touch of a hand. Well, me, I fall in love with you every single day. And I just wanna tell you I am. So honey, now take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your head on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud, maybe we found love right where we are. When my hair's all but gone and my memory fades, and the crowds don't remember my name. When my hands don't play the strings the same way, I know you will still love me the same. 'Cause honey, you're so old, it's evergreen. And baby, your smile's forever in my mind and memory. I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. And maybe it's all part of a plan. Well, I'll just keep on making the same mistakes, hoping that you'll understand. But baby, now take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your head on my beating heart. thinking out loud that maybe we found love right where we are. Baby, now take me into your loving arms, kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Oh, darling, place your head on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud that maybe we found love right where we are. Well, maybe we found love right where we are. And we found love right where we are.
Blue Moon. Stupid Cupid, you're a real mean guy. I'd like to clip your wings so you can fly. Hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. I can't do my homework and I can't think straight. I need 'em every morning about 8:30. I'm acting like a lovesick fool. You've even got me carrying his books to school. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. You mixed me up but good right from the very start. Hey, go play Robin Hood with somebody else's heart. You got me jumping like a crazy clown, and I don't feature what you put down. Since I kissed his loving lips and wine, the thing that bothers me is that hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. You got me jumping like a crazy clown, and I don't feature what you putting down. Since kissed his loving lips and wine, the thing that bothers me is that I like it fine. Hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. Hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. Stupid Cupid, you're a real mean guy. I'd like to clip your wings so you can fly. I'm in love and it's a crying shame, and I know that you're the one to blame. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. I can't do my homework and I can't think straight. I need 'em every morning about 8:30. I'm acting like a lovesick fool. You've even got me carried. Hey, hey, set free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. You mixed me up but good right from the very start. Hey, go play Robin Hood with somebody else's heart. You get crazy clowns, and I don't appreciate what you're putting down. Saying sarcastic love and lips and wine. The thing that bothers me is that I like it fine. Hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. You got me jumping like a crazy clown, and I don't feature what you're putting down. Since I kissed your love and lips and wine, the thing that bothers me is that I like it fine. Hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me. Baby, stop picking on me.
Work like they used to before, and I can't sweep you off of your feet. Will your mouth still remember the taste of my love? Will your eyes still smile from your cheeks? Darling, I will be loving you till we're 70. And baby, my heart could still fall as hard at 23. And I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. Maybe just the touch of a hand. Well, me, I fall in love with every single day, and I'm gonna tell you I am. So honey, now take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your head on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud, maybe we found love right where we are. When my hair's all but gone and my memory fades, and the crowds don't remember my name. When my hands don't play the strings the same way, I know you will still love me the same. 'Cause honey, your soul could never grow old, it's evergreen. And baby, your smile's forever in my mind and memory. I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. And maybe it's all part of a plan. Well, I'll just keep on making the same mistakes, hoping that you'll understand. But baby, now take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your head on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud, maybe we found love right where we are. La, la, la. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Oh, darling, place your head on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud that maybe we found love right where we are. Or maybe we found love right where we are. And we found love right where we are. I'm living in that 21st century, doing something mean to it. Do it better than anybody you ever seen. Do it. Screams from the haters, got a nice ring to it. I guess every superhero need his theme music. No one man should have all that power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. Stop tripping, I'm tripping off the power. The system broken, the schools closed, the prisons open. We ain't got nothing to lose, everybody we rollin'. Everybody we rollin'. With some light-skinned girls and some Kelly Rollins. And this white man world, we the ones chosen. So good night, cool world, I see you in the morning. I see you in the morning. This is way too much, I need a moment. No one man should have all that power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. Stop tripping, I'm tripping off the power. That the world's ours. Of the season for loving. What's your name? Who's your daddy? Is he rich like me? Has he take us anytime to show you what you need to live? Tell it to me slowly. Tell you why I really want to know. It's the time of the season for loving.
Welcome. We're going to look at the first story in Ovid's Metamorphoses that's no longer about things that come before humanity, right? This is the first introduction to what we sort of need to know now that we've done creation and the big giant titans and all this stuff that made it possible for being to happen. But now we're going to look at it's almost like we went through the first 11 chapters of Genesis, and now we're into more of the Abrahamic, this is what life's like on a daily basis thing. So we said we want to get to know Apollo. We want to get to know Daphne. We want to get to know the characters in the mythopoetic narrative as if they're personalities that live in the world. That's how they're presented to us. And so let's try and do that. I'm going to see if we can add this slide in here. It's the time of the season for loving. So the first thing we're going to do is look at some art and see if we can come to understand. All right, we have two new ones here. Let's put this one in first. All right. There's two grandfather, grandmother deities that are way, way above and beyond all the rest of the gods. In almost all of the mythology, this is the case. Why don't we see if we can add a slideshow? We've got 3 we need here. Which is the one? Let's see if it's this one. It's the time of, oh, you know what? The best way to present it would be like this. That would be the right way to do it. Okay, bear with me. We're a little bit new to this, but we'll add this to the stream. This is who we're going to get to know. This guy right here. And then it's the time. There we go. Yeah, I think this is the one. Okay, so let's scroll down here. It's not the one. Let's look at this one instead. And there's a new Jungian key that we're going to be examining that we haven't talked about in our previous class on the Jungian keys. And that's that we're going to look at the symbols themselves to try to find the meaning. So let's get into this. Just bear with me while I set up these PowerPoints here. That's not right. Yep, this is the one. Okay. So let's say share this screen instead. We'll remove present share screen. That's this one, I believe. Yeah, okay. All right. So let's start here. All right. So this is who we're going to try to get to know. The first thing we're going to see is this character Apollo. Who is Apollo? So he's sitting in the chariot. We see his arms strained in musculature, pulling back as hard as he can the reins of horses that clearly want to run more wild than he's letting them. He's surrounded by the hours. He's surrounded by the seasons. He's surrounded by the proper order that he's helped to create and make possible. So he plays, that's part of the role he plays. So this is Apollo. He's got a sister named Diana. She's a huntress. They're hunters in a sense. He has the lyre over here on the left. The lira is his musical instrument. Notice he's holding in his right hand in the statue a laurel wreath crown. Piercing eyes, focusing on the target. Okay, there's something flying up above, a little bit higher than the realm he's in, but here in his realm, that's him right there with the fiddle. He's the god of a certain kind of music. Here he is in his chariot again. Notice the arm is straining and musculature is straining. The reins are taut. The horses are being held back. Here he is up at the top, the god of the sun. Here he is again. His arm is pulled all the way back. The reins are taut. The horse wants to run wilder. Same thing. Reins, horse. Wi-Fi is okay. Well, we've got some people coming here. Checking out the Wi-Fi. Here he is. The sun. Beware the justice of the sun. Here's his arm again, pulling back on the reins. Hey, he does quite well with the ladies. The nymphs, the hours, and the muses. They all seem to live in the realm that he's made possible. And we're going to see how it is that he's made it possible for the higher arts to do well. Here are the nymphs. They tend to love him. He sort of takes it for granted. Notice he's never looking at, look how he's looking up. He's never looking at any of the feminine principles that are drawn to him. That's going to be important for the story we're going to tell. because we're going to tell, well, this is quite a painting. We're going to tell a story about Apollo as one of two heroes. Here he is with his sister. Slaying the 14 children of some deities that made fun of his parents for only having two. All right, let's go back to the correct one. All right, let's see how this works. So we'll hit slideshow. Okay, Apollo is going to be a type of hero. He's the first character we're going to meet. And the role he plays is highly significant in the role of human suffering. Let's do this. This is what we did last night. So Google art project. Let's just try to pull up the art that we're thinking of while we're talking instead of relying on the slideshow, which has it all in there somewhere. Apollo. All right. And his sister. Both in the sphere of the vicissitude of human life. Let's see if we can find that here. I'll share what I'm doing. So we're at Google Art Project, which allows you to see gigapixel scanned artworks from the world's museums. And we're just going to try to find a specific painting here, a sketch, rather, that's going to give us an idea of the role that he plays in our lives. And let's see. It's the time of the season. It's his vicissitudes. There it is. Okay, great. So let's take a look at this painting, or this sketch. Here's Apollo, here's his sister. Here's the sphere of the vicissitude of human suffering, or human life, rather. We've got shepherding, all sorts of things that go into making life possible. He's quite a large figure here. He plays a large role in what makes life possible on Earth. So we're going to be introduced to two characters at the same time, because the stories, as we said, are characterological. So you only really get to know them as characters in the way they interact with characters that are not them. So we're going to get two hero stories in one. It's a twofer. We're going to get, let's get into that by saying share this again. So we're going to get into two hero stories, but first we have to understand the context. So who are the gods beyond the gods? Well, every one of the characters that we meet is a yin and a yang and a yin, right? The question isn't, is this a good guy or a bad guy? It's, what is this person good at? What are they good for? Who are they good with? Where is the area that they should be having influence? And what are they bad at? What are they blind to? Where is the area where they go too far and where they cause trouble, right? That's true of Apollo. It's going to be true of Daphne. It's going to be true of every character, but it's also true of the sort of two largest figures, a masculine and a feminine, traditionally depicted characters that represent essentially order and chaos. So from the oldest story that we have in written form is the story of Marduk, very much the Apollo story. He's approaching with piercing eyes all around his head. He's paying attention. Attention is part of what he is. He speaks magic words. He's bravely facing the chaos of the dragon of chaos that's come to destroy and make life impossible to live. So let's talk about the two major figures there. Why is life sending dragons to destroy? Why is the universe, the cosmos, sending chaos to destroy all being? Well, there's two figures. The first one is not good or bad. What she is she represents the part of being that you don't understand. So she's Mother Nature, she's Mother Earth. She brings life into being. She breastfeeds that life before it understands that sustenance is required, right? So it's everything from this is from the realm of you don't know what's going on, but don't worry, it's all good, except that it's not all good. Because if you're in the place where you don't understand anything, you get You get the trees and the flowering fruits that come to you so that you can sustain life without asking or tilling or working on it. But you also get the predators and the dragons and the monstrous things that come to destroy. You get disease. The things you don't comprehend come exactly from the same place. So what she is both of those things, right? Good for some things, bad for us in other settings, right? She should be respected. This is a dangerous and a powerful thing. Well, if we're looking to achieve balance between that and the opposite principle of order, okay, here is Marduk coming to slay the dragons that are coming from this realm of we don't know what the heck is going on. We don't know what the heck is going on realm is quite beautiful and wonderful sometimes. And also, well, if it's time for you to be fodder for the wolf, then the wolf is also something you don't understand. But the answer to that is to face the thing that's most terrifying, stare at it, be aware of it, pay attention to it, and cut it into pieces and make sense out of it. And what you get out of that is you build a world that's more livable. You actually build it out of the pieces that you destroy. And we'll talk about that more. So if that's an ordering principle that's approaching the chaos, the other balance that's horrible is when the order is gone too far, right? This is the opposite deity, this grandfather masculine deity that says, no, we've got it all figured out and you're defined in this very limited, specific way. And so there's nothing more to it than that. We've got all the answers. We've got the answers. We figured it out. We in the past, we slew the chaos and we've got the answers and nothing ever changes. Well, neither place is a place that you can inhabit. You can't live in a place where the predators and the monsters and the things you don't see coming and you don't comprehend just eat you at will. That's not the type of life we're trying to thrive with. We can't thrive in that way. But likewise, if we become blind to the idea that the cosmos is an ever-changing thing, that's the book of Metamorphoses, says that change is fundamental to all of this. If we remember the invocation at the beginning, now I shall tell of things that change, new being out of old. Since you, O gods, created mutable arts and gifts, give me the voice to tell the shifting story of the world from its beginning to this present hour. So we've seen from the beginning of how matter and everything came together and exploded out of nothing, and the chaos that's the medium for that. And then finally we get this planet and we get this life and we get these attempts at thriving, but things have to be destroyed in a flood. And now there's this new humanity that comes about that brings where we are. Now that we're in that part of the story, there's still change that defines everything and changedness. And so you can't live in either of these two extremes alone. The way that life moves forward is by the chasing of two incompatible, impossibly different principles after one another. Okay, too much order is hell, but also it's pretty nice, right? Like culture is good. That's the place where you've got the walls and the protections against neighboring tribes, against the sun, against the wind. You've got science and you've got medicine, and Apollo is the god of all those things. So if we go back to this slide here, let's go and see if we can learn who Apollo is. So this is Apollo. Apollo is the god of medicine. Okay. I guess the most important one for us to look at is the python first. This is the story we're going to be looking at. All right. This is the story we're going to be looking at. Here's Apollo as Marduk, right? His eyes are piercing and staring right at the thing that's terrifying, the thing that would destroy us. And even that thing is turning away, right? That thing is no match for his unerring aim and his willingness to face what's terrifying. What's interesting about that is in the temple of Apollo, where the oracle at Delphi pronounced Socrates the wisest man and all of that, in that temple, there's a throne. Apollo has a throne, and that throne has snakes. There's a lantern that the priests use to light oil, and it has a dragon on it. So what's going on here? Well, Apollo slays Python, the dragon. He creates, why don't we open this up in this other one so we can really look at it more carefully. This is how we should do it. We should just stick to Google Art Project here. Apollo and Python. Let's check out this one. So, Apollo is the willingness to stare at what's terrifying and make sense out of it. I'm going to tell you a quick story about monkeys in a lab. A bunch of chimpanzees in a cage. Someone throws a rubber snake into the chimpanzee cage, and the chimpanzees run away. They flee. They climb up to the very top of the cage like they're trying desperately to get as far away from this thing as possible. They're not looking at it, right? It's too terrifying to look at. We have visual perception in the lower half of our visual field that is so highly attuned to seeing the patterns of snakeness that we will actually physically move and jump before we can process the image consciously of what we're looking at. Just like when you touch a hot stove, your hand pulls away and then you start to feel the pain. The role of snakes to primates is this role. Snakes are one of the things that represent, holy crap, you don't know what's going on and it might eat you at any moment. So you take this rubber snake and you throw it in the chimpanzee cage, and they all climb up as far away as they can, and they scream. They scream, and I believe that the part of their brain that's activated while they're screaming is the same part of the brain that is active when you swear, right? When you're cursing, a different part of your brain lights up. So when you curse, a different part of your brain lights up than when you're regularly speaking. What happens is if you throw a rubber snake into a cage full of chimpanzees, they not only climb up to the top of the cage and scream, and they refuse to look at this terrifying thing, but they scream, and the part of their brain that lights up while they're screaming is the part that lights up when you're swearing. So they're going, fuck, fuck, fuck. They're really, God damn, there's a big fucking snake down there, right? But they're refusing to look at it. They're terrified. It's crippling them. It's turning them to stone, right? There's no way to live and thrive as a community in an environment where Python hasn't been slain. And as we said a second ago, our history as primates with snakes goes back so far that just like when you touch a hot stove and you pull your hand away before you feel the pain, you jump and move when the bottom half of your visual field perceives snake motion, even before you can process what you're looking at. So this goes back a long way, this imagery here. Now, if we share this, okay, good, this is shared. So I think I can zoom in now. And it's not being shared here. So what if I say add to stream? Okay, this is what we're looking at. Good. So this is the thing that's too scary to look at. But life can't go on. Now that everything's cooled down on the earth, life can't go on unless we have some willingness to stare at it. So if we get back to the chimpanzees, they're screaming and they climb up to the top of the cage, like, get me out of here, but they're refusing to look at it. But you do that long enough and it gets boring. You can't do that forever. And one chimp, this one has to do it first, one chimp eventually gets bored enough that he kind of looks down to see what the heck's going on. Like, is it still there? What's going on? I thought I'd be dead by now. But, I'm kind of calming down a little bit. My brain can take over. So I'm willing to look down and he's still pretty scared. He hides from it. But eventually, it's not moving. And, what would happen if I dropped a stick on it? What would happen then? Maybe it'll come after me. I don't know. I want to see what happens. It's not moving. So he drops a stick on it, a branch. It doesn't move. And he stares at it and he's still looking at it. He's no longer refusing to look away from it. The thing that you refuse to look at, it's not just big and scary, like this is big and scary. It's even bigger and even scarier because it's everything you're not looking at, right? So the dragon gets as large as everything you're not looking at when you refuse to look at it. That's the monkeys, the other chimps at the top that refuse to look at it. It's everywhere. It's right behind them, about to bite them in their minds. But the one chimp that looks at it, he starts to, it isn't moving. What if I drop a stick on it? Maybe nothing will happen. And then he sees, well, it's not, maybe this thing only looks scary. So let me drop something else on it. Maybe I can climb down a little bit. I'll be quick to climb back up, but let me start approaching the terrifying thing and start looking at it. That's what this painting is showing us, the principle of looking at the thing that seems too terrifying to look at. So that's what it's telling us. It's saying, be like Apollo sometimes. and stare at the thing that's too terrifying to look at, and maybe you can slay it. And here's the really interesting part. What happens eventually is that this chimp figures out that it's no threat at all, but the other chimps haven't figured it out yet. And what he then does is he picks up the rubber snake and chases the other chimps around with it, and they're all afraid of him. He now has power that he's never had before, and he has the power of the serpent. So why is it that Apollo's throne and the priestly ornaments that they use in the temple of Apollo have snakes on them? It's because Apollo did this. Apollo was the one, he is the one who represents what it takes to stare at the thing that's too terrifying to allow life to continue. And what happens is he creates this. This is the higher realm, this space. This is Parnassus's airy height. He creates this beautiful space where he and the muses dwell, and where higher art is possible and more advanced, sophisticated culture can come into being. He makes that possible. That's the first hero story we're going to get, but we're not getting anything in ones. We're getting them in twos. If we want a balance between order and chaos, he represents bringing order out of chaos. We can see how important and helpful and good that would be. But that's, of course, not enough, because there's another hell on the other side. And that hell is the hell of too much order. And Apollo, for all of his ability to see the terrifying thing, is quite blind to the fact that he's sometimes blind to other things. He thinks he sees everything, and there's some things he doesn't see. Specifically, he doesn't recognize a principle higher than himself. Cupid flies with wings higher than Apollo, and Apollo doesn't recognize it, but he's going to recognize it at the end of the story that we're going to read. And that's how we're going to get the opposite hero principle to tell us the other side of what we need to know. Let's take a little bit more look at Apollo first, and let's get to know him. These are wood nymphs. He takes for granted that they love him, and of course they do. He's the god of medicine. What does it mean to be the god of medicine? It means to look at all the millions and billions of possible combinations of plants that you don't understand that could give you poison ivy or make you sick or cure your sickness. Who knows what they do? We're in the realm of chaos. But if you look at it and you cut it into pieces and you make sense out of it and you categorize it and you do some taxonomy and you do some experiments, you can figure out everything they do for good or ill. And that makes the world more like the paradise on top of the mountain that he's helping to create. He's the god of the lyre, the lyre. So he's a god, he's not the god of music, but he's a god of a type of music. Let's see here. This is probably all out of order now. This is the story we're going to look at later. But do we have what we need here? Let's see. Let's get past all of this. Is the main story we're going to focus on, but let's skip past it and see. Should put this in first. Come on. Here we go. Okay, we're going to learn about Cupid. We're going to learn about Cupid and Venus. He plays a role in this story, so that's where we wanted to start. Oh, man. It's in one of these slideshows here. My bad. Let's see if it's in this one. All right, so here he is holding back the reins. We're going to learn what that means in a moment. Okay, that's not what we want. Oh, this is no longer frustrating because instead of doing any of this, we're going to go back here and we're just going to look up what we want to find as we want to find it. So let's take a look at some of the other stories about Apollo so that we can figure out who he is. There's a story about Apollo and Pan that we want to look at. So Apollo, in order to understand the Daphne story, we need to understand who Apollo is. And one of the Jungian keys we said we were going to use is to look at all these different stories and see what they have in common. Yeah, that was a faster way to get to what we needed. To heck with these PowerPoints. Okay, so Midas, the guy who loves gold. The guy who helps bring some gold back into the world when we're not in the golden age anymore. In any case, Midas asks for a competition between Pan and Apollo. Pan is an older deity than Apollo, a generationally older deity. He plays the flute. He plays the bluegrass. He plays the farmer shepherd type music out in the woods. So there's a competition between Pan and Apollo, and Pan goes first, and Pan starts to play, and his music is so beautiful that the birds themselves begin to sing along with it, and the trees themselves begin to dance to the music that Pan is playing. It's impressive. But then Apollo's turn. Apollo gets up and he starts to play the lyre. And the birds shut up and the trees stand still. He's not the god of music. He's the god of symphonic music. He's the god of that music where you open up the hall and your jaw hangs open and you're dumbfounded and you're frozen and it's screaming at you, your place in the cosmos. He's the god of that. So we start to understand who Apollo is by taking all these seemingly different stories and saying, what's the one thread that's connected between them all? That's the essence of the character. So he slays Python. He is the god of a kind of music, but it's a numerical, symphonic, complicated kind of music, the sort of music that you'd have to spend a couple decades studying in order to be competent enough in it. He sends his kids away. He sends his kid away to be educated. It's like education's a big, important thing for Apollo. There's another story. Let's look at Apollo. Oops. All right, we'll get good at this. Apollo and Diana, his sister. There's another story we want to look at to get an idea of who Apollo is. And that would be, well, here's a good one. It's not the one I was thinking of, but it's quite good. The poor children of Niobe. So Niobe and her husband have 14 kids. Apollo and Diana's parents only have 2. And the parents of these 14 gods are making fun of Apollo's parents for saying, hey, why you got such a small family? We've got 14 kids, you only have 2. And Apollo and his sister are sent by their parents, to go and slay the 14 children of these deities. And they do so in revenge against them. Look at Diana with her bow, Apollo with his. This is a horrible and an ugly thing to see. Remember, we said these characters are not good, they're not bad, they are a thing. They're in the world and we have to know what they are. They represent a spirit that has its own will and that can possess us, that is moving history as much as it can in the direction it wants to. And so we say to ourselves, okay, well, what does Apollo represent? What's the thread that's similar to slaying the chaos and seeing it, and the thread of symphonic music versus bluegrass or something like that? What is it that Apollo is in this story? Well, there's 2 ways of living in this world that we have in this part of the story. You can have the farm rural life, and in that life, you want lots of kids. It's easy to want lots of kids because they help pick the tomatoes, and within a few years, they help raise the other kids. I mean, it's nice. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to have lots of children in that environment. When is it not a blessing to have lots of children? When you have highly complicated, imperialistic, Supreme Court-like civilizational structures. That's what Apollo represents. That's where family planning and abortion come in. Okay? The character of Apollo is the type of thing that says, well, if we're going to have this, we're going to need to study for a few decades in order to be competent to even be a part of it. So we're going to have to put off child raising, and children are mostly just annoying to us, and we have to spend decades trying to educate them. And that's a cost. It's a valuable thing to do if we were wise enough to invest in it properly. But, you know, kids are basically a problem for 25, 30 years until they can participate in such a complicated system. So we start to see the idea of who Apollo is. He brings the sun up every morning, right? There's an ordered structure to reality that is more comfortable than just living in the woods where dragons and wolves can get you, right? We're not saying he's good or bad. We're saying, well, he brings a certain type of good into the world. And that type of good has some bad that comes with it, because that's who he is. He can't not be the character that has that difficult element in it. So you can't get rid of him, and you shouldn't put him on the throne where Zeus is. Zeus is on the throne to say, these are the proper places for all the other deities. They do something right here. They're out of line when they go over here. He understands, and that's where there's a pantheonic order to everything. But any one of the deities, you shouldn't try to abolish and stomp them out, because you're going to miss out on something that is alive. It won't be killed. It's still there. You're just blind to it, and it'll possess you when you're not ready. So make the right sacrifices and propitiations. We're learning about these characters to orient ourselves in a world where we know that they exist, because they are forces that exist in the world. And we talked a lot about that before. Now, so there's two wrong things. One is to deny them and pretend they're not there. Well, they're more powerful than you are. They're going to show up, and you better understand them. The other wrong thing to do is to absolutize them or universalize them, or essentially to dethrone Zeus and allow them, the wrong element, to be sitting on that throne, right? Apollo, that's dangerous. That brings hell. And Apollo's son Phaeton is that principle itself. And we're going to look at that story quite carefully later. But he's not holding back the reins. Apollo learns his lesson to hold back the reins in the story we're going to be focusing on, but his son doesn't, and things come to a very bad end very swiftly. Okay, so that's another story of Apollo. So again, we're using this Jungian key of saying, okay, look for what's similar about all the stories. That's the key for figuring out exactly who this character is. And it's so confusing when you look at the differences. It seems arbitrary. It's like, okay, he kills these kids. He falls in love with someone who he thinks cheats on him, and he murders her in a rage. And then he desperately tries to find plants that will cure the thing he killed, because he's the god of medicine, right? So how is he the god of medicine? And he has this weird story, and this weird story with Pan, and this weird story with the children of Niobe. And the point is, all of these different stories seem to be talking arbitrarily about someone else, except there is a character there. And the one thing that's common between them all is how you get to understand what he is. He's the thing that looks at chaos and cuts it into pieces and makes order out of it, that makes the world a better place. We could go back to that painting again, right? Let's see if we can find it. Okay, so here he is. This is who he is. He invents medicine. He's the god of medicine. Why? Because he slays this thing, and therefore he creates this type of space up here. And let's go ahead and grab. Now, what does it mean to climb to the top of a competence hierarchy like that? Well, it means that this is Parnassus airy height. It means that the chicks dig you, or at least most of them tend to, right? It means that your relationship, these are the muses, right? These are the higher forms of art. So he's making a world where poetry and symphonic orchestras and sculpture, all of the higher types of art can come into being. They don't have enough to come into being, the sophisticated kind of art that's different from like other types of art, like bluegrass and things like that, which can already exist before Apollo shows up. But we would be living in a poorer world if we weren't living in the world with Apollo. And we could look up Apollo and the hours. We can say, well, there's an awful lot of femininely depicted characters, like the muses and the hours and the wood nymphs and the nymphs, that they really dig Apollo, and for good reason. By approaching a chaotic mess that seems impossible to solve. Just put Dawn in there and see if we can get away from the spaceship things a little bit. By doing that, oh, here's a good one. These sketches and paintings and sculptures will tell us that you create, am I sharing the right thing? Yeah, good. That you create this space where a kind of a confident, straightforward, I know where I am and who I am, and I have this, like, you wouldn't walk up to a feminine character like this and think you're going to get away with anything. Like, no one's going to insult characters like these and, not be laid low quite quickly. And the reason why this type of advanced confident femininity can exist is a space that's been created by the work of staring at the thing too terrifying to stare at and slaying it. That's the lesson of the hero story of Apollo that we're getting. And like we said earlier, when you slay that thing, you get the powers of it. So what we want here is another story of Apollo where he sends, let's look at his throne too while we're at it. Oops. Which we talked about a second ago. Here it is. There's the snakes in his throne. Why? Because if you slay the thing that's too terrifying, you're the chimp in the cage that can chase around the other chimps with your rubber snake that you were willing to look at and realize wasn't dangerous. Trying to find another story here, which I'm failing to find here, but we're going to find it right now. I think it's a statue that we're looking for. And that statue is... How do we get not the space situation in our searches? Maybe if we add just that much in, change our results. Okay, better options here. Now, here, let's look at this. Here, he's the god of the sun. He's the god of justice. Beware the justice of the sun. I mean, I shouldn't say justice, but beware the justice of the sun is what I'll say. And quid rides, mutato nomine. Don't laugh. Change but the names and the stories about you, right? This is something that you stand in front of it and you think, okay, there's something powerful and larger than I am, and I should be aware of that thing. This is the Supreme Court. This is imperial military might. This is medicine and science, which is a heck of a thing to try to cut into pieces and make sense out of. This is the power of Python, owned, the power of the dangerous world, owned by the one who is the embodiment of the willingness to stare at what's too terrifying to look at and cut it into pieces. Now, there's a reason, this is from his temple, right? So the brass hanging lamp with the griffin head handle, I believe this is from the Temple of Apollo. So the dragon is, you don't really think of a dragon and a sun together that much, but dragons and shining sun like gold go together. And that's just the children of Niobe being wounded and killed, I believe. Or that's what this one is. Or maybe both of them. One or the other is. All right, the statue we want is really powerfully insightful, if we could just find it. There's a deity and his children who are enemies of Apollo in a story that we're not focusing on right now. You can see the connection between Christ, David, a few other things here, Samson. There's inspiration artistically and mythopoetically in between those types of characters. Although Christ is the other hero, and that's Daphne. Daphne is a Christ-like hero, which we're going to be looking at in the other half of the story. So remember, we said that there's a hell of too much chaos where we don't understand anything, but there's the hell of too much order. And now we're coming to understand Apollo. That's why we played the Kanye West video. That that imagery there, that's Apollo, right? Kanye West in that video was giving us, here it is. Oh no, that's not it. That's the story we're going to be looking at in depth here. Why can't we find this one? Oh, here it is, right in front of me. Okay. So, Lacon and his two sons writhe and struggle, caught in the grip of the serpents that wind among their limbs. Their father is large and powerful. Wild hair and beard contrast with the smaller. The Trojan prince angered Apollo by breaking a vow of celibacy he swore to the god, and then warning the Trojans not to bring the wooden horse left by the Greeks into the city. To silence him, Apollo sent serpents from the sea to kill him and his sons. Okay? The chimpanzee that's willing to look at the rubber snake and figure out how to control it gains the powers of the thing that used to be the predator of it, right? So anyway, that's the point of that. And we should stare at this longer. But in any case, what were we saying? Okay, so in that Mother Nature source of predation and father culture, protection and potential tyranny, we're trying to strike a balance. And the way we strike the balance is by having heroes that say, okay, the balance is too far towards chaos. There's too many dragons around. We need to pull it this direction. And that's Apollo. But by definition, this yin-yang symbol, by definition, the very thing that allows him to do that makes him dangerous when the power is pushed too far towards the order side of things. So he's the first hero, but we only get introduced to him as two different heroes, he and Daphne. We're going to realize what the anti-hero or the other hero is that's in opposition to the very thing that Apollo is doing. So Apollo is pulling in this direction away from too much chaos. And of course, the danger is he's great when there's too much chaos. He's not the appropriate thing in another setting. So we'll go back, and I'll probably leave this open now so that we can always keep going back to it. But we'll go back to this. This is the entire story that we're going to be looking at here. How do we find it again? Oh, here it is. Okay, good. Oops. All right, here we go. So this is one part of the story, but it's not the full story. Who the heck is this in the background? What's going on over here? Daphne doesn't live up here. Daphne's not interested in living up here. Daphne is completely disinterested in all of this higher culture and complicated everything. Daphne's a hippie. Daphne's a wood nymph. Daphne, her foot declines toward uneven ways, as you can see here. She runs, and notice she has her own bow and arrow. She's like, yeah, thanks a lot, whatever, man. I'm fine. I don't need you to slay me because I'm just freaking fine exactly where I am. Thanks a lot for all that stuff you do, but I'm not interested. That's who Daphne is. And she dances and lives in the woods. And we're going to learn an awful lot about her in a minute. We're stressing understanding who Apollo is first, because the story that we're about to read is not Apollo the good guy. It's the bad side of Apollo. And Apollo, as great as he is, with all these paintings and sculptures, why don't we go back to this one and say, okay, we're going to talk about Cupid in a moment. Now, where did I put all of these? I have too many slideshows. It's too hard to find them all. Well, let's try to add another couple in here and see if we can't get the right ones. Let's say slides. What if we did? I can't read the title of it. That's a problem. Nope, that's not what we want. Oh, sorry. Oh, do you want me to add you in there? There's some people here, and I should be adding them to the stream so they can interrupt and talk. Sorry about that, guys. I forgot I have to do that. All right, let's see. if you bear with me, let's find. Well, let's just go look back at those. We already looked at these paintings of Apollo hanging out. I'm going to leave this here. We looked at the paintings of Apollo, and he's got all of the nymphs are happily washing. You know what? We should look at it again while we talk about it. 1 second. Okay. The muses, the hours, and the nymphs. There's an awful lot of important elements to being that are traditionally depicted as feminine that gather around and are super interested in Apollo, and for good reason. So here's, what is this, a sketch of the statue that we're looking at before. Notice he's never looking at any of them. He's kind of always pointing up to something higher or pointing out to some important thing. But, you know, they dig him. They dig him, but he doesn't exactly dig them. And he doesn't really understand love. He doesn't understand Cupid. And we're going to see that in the story that we're going to read. He doesn't, there's a principle that flies higher than he does that he doesn't recognize. So in order to get to that part of the story, here he is again. That's the sketch of this statue. It's unbelievable. So to get to that part of the story, we have to talk about Stupid Cupid. And that's the reason we played that song earlier. So if we go here, let's just get into it. Let's get into Cupid. All right. This is inspired by David. Here we go. Look at him looking so confidently. So, right, this is like David looking at the stones. He's going to slay the dragon. Now, wait a minute. Cupid's going to take down Apollo. Cupid's going to take down Apollo. So let's go to, I think I'm going to just decide that slides are not helpful. And what is helpful, sticking to this. So I'm going to get rid of the slides from all of this because they're too confusingly unhelpful. And instead, we're going to, in real time, just search the stuff we're looking for. So it's remove from studio. Here we go. Okay. So we're sharing this one, I believe. Let's go take a look at it. This is Cupid, little baby Cupid. All right. We've got a lot of connection between this and David, obviously. I can't believe I did that. Hold on a second. I spoke too soon. We'll go back to the slides. All right, here we go.
Sir, if you could throw some light on what do we mean by the colonial text?
It's a little hard to hear you. It's sounding robotic. I don't know if that's generally the case, but I think it's something on your end. So this is Cupid the Conqueror, Cupid the Victorious. This is Mars's helmet sitting at the bottom of his feet, and this is Zeus's thunderbolt. And behind him, draped over here, is Hercules's lion's coat. Okay? This is like the David beyond the David as far as heroes go. What if we were to go to Street View and check that out? All right. Here's the statue. Where you can find it. And what's this back here? That's Apollo's lyra. So what happens is Cupid is above Zeus, Apollo, Hercules. He's above everybody. He's got wings. They're gods. They fly around in this dreamlike world, but they're not depicted with wings. Cupid's got wings. He's a higher principle, and he flies above them. And in story after story, Cupid takes a divine principle that's important for life, and he defeats it so badly that they pay tribute to him and say, "Yeah, you're more powerful than we are." Mars gives his helmet to Cupid, and Apollo gives his lyra, his musical instrument. He says, "All right, you taught me a lesson, and you're more powerful than I am." And that lesson is the story that we're going to focus on today, that we're going to read. If we go back to the statue in front, here he is. He's just, he's young. He looks weak, right? Let's go check out some other, he's quite supremely confident in his ability, though. So let's look at Cupid. Where does he come from? Where does Cupid come from? Well, he comes from Venus. First of all, she's his mother. So let's see if we can get there in this. Oh, this is what we should do. Here we go. Cupid. All right, baby Cupid. Here we go. So let's see who his mom is and where he comes from. Well, the first thing we need to know about is Venus. So this is Eve on the left, and it's Adam and Eve on the right. This is artistic and mythopoetic inspiration, and there's a dialogue between the myths, obviously, for Venus. Hey, what did I say? Look at the tree, look at the fruit, the painting, the sculpture of it, or the structure of it was actually directly inspired by the piece that we looked at earlier in the last slide. All right, here she is. She's not love. She doesn't represent love, but she sometimes gives birth to love. Cupid is a different principle. He has wings. She doesn't. Okay. Cupid, where does he come from? He comes from his mom. They've got an interesting relationship. Here they are. Look, he's got a bow and arrow. Where did he get that from? Wait, what's he doing over here? His mom is raising him. She's rearing him. She's teaching him. Here she's blinding him. She's putting the blindfold on him. She understands that this would be proper for Cupid to not be able to decide. Oh, in this statue here, she's teaching him how to shoot the bow and arrow, right? So she's educating him and raising him. He's getting his development from her maternal instinctual understanding of who he is and what he needs to become. And what he becomes is the conqueror of conquerors. Okay. If we go to this again, as we're going to keep going back, there's something that flies higher than Apollo, and all the good that he's done, there's something he doesn't recognize that's above him. And even above Parnassus's airy height, there's this Cupid principle happening here. Let's get into it. I think we've done enough prepping. Let's get into the story. We've started, we can look at a lot more art and we can get a lot more out of this, but why don't we say slides, story, here we go. I think we've been introduced to enough that we'll be able to know where to look to find other answers later. So here's the story of Apollo and Daphne. The first and fairest of his loves was she, whom not blind fortune, but the dire decree of angry Cupid forced him to desire. Daphne was her name, and Phineus her sire. So let's get introduced to Daphne for a second. She lives in the woods, as we said. Oh, I need to add this back in. This is going to make sense. Here's who she is. She's not interested in anything Apollonian. She's got her own bow and arrow. She's not interested in being protected by anything. She wants to live in the woods. Now, the first and fairest of his loves was she. All those paintings and sculptures of Apollo having created this beautiful space and the chicks digging him and all of that stuff, all of that, he has no idea about the principle of love. He doesn't understand it. He's created a great space for lots of awesome things to happen and the world to be more safe and secure. And there's a reason why the feminine principle is attracted to him in the form of the hours and the most of the nymphs and the muses, but not every woman is interested in him. Swelled with the pride that new success attends, he sees the stripling while his bow he bends. So Cupid has killed Python, and he's awful high on himself, and he thinks he's the cat's tits. And he sees the stripling, the baby, Cupid. He thinks, oh, a little baby with a bow and arrow. What the hell's that about? And thus insults him, thou lascivious boy. And thus insults him. Thou lascivious boy, are arms like these for children to employ? No. Such achievements are my proper claim, due to my vigor and unerring aim. Resistless are my shafts, and Python late in such a feathered death hath found his fate. Take up the torch and lay my weapons by, with that the feeble souls of lovers fry. Apollo is expressing contempt for the very idea of love, and he only comprehends lust, not love. Apollo understands Venus. He doesn't understand Cupid. Okay? He says, why should you have a bow and arrow? What the heck is that about? Now, here's the Jungian key we're going to introduce for the first time in this course. Look to the symbols. A sign, when you're driving down the road, says Disneyland, next left. That's a sign. A symbol is a sign in the shape of the ears of Mickey Mouse with an arrow pointing in a direction, right? The difference between a sign and a symbol is that a symbol contains within itself something of what it's trying to point you towards, okay? So the idea is not that these stories are decodable, and so Venus stands for lust, so just cross her name out and write lust in. No, she doesn't. She's a personality. She's much more complicated than that. What is Venus? Venus is this figure. Venus is the way she holds her hand. Venus is her relationship to Apollo, her relationship to Mars, her relationship to Cupid. Venus is how she interacts. Venus is a full personality, and within all those things, there are impressions and forms and images that are symbolic, but symbolism is not signifying. We're not signing at things. We're not signifying things. We're actually embodying those things. She is her form. Cupid, same thing. Why does he have arrows? Why does Cupid have arrows? This is the question Apollo's bringing up. He's saying, what the hell is this? A baby with a bow and arrow? What the hell? I know why I have a bow and arrow. I have a bow and arrow to slay chaos and make the world more habitable. That's what I'm about. What the heck are you about? Well, we might ask ourselves that question. We might say, yeah, I mean, from a Darwinian perspective, I can see why burning fires of lust would have to exist for reproduction to happen and things like that. So, I mean, that's a principle in the world that makes some sense. I can see why the feeble souls of lovers fry in the torch of lust and passion and things like that. But what the heck is this? What the heck is this arrow about? So I don't know what it means, but let's attempt to understand what it means. Arrows are sharp. They're pointed. They come out of nowhere. You don't see them coming. What's the difference between sharp pain and engulfing pain, right? If you're engulfed in fire, well, you're pretty much done for. If you're walking around and you're trying to work and you're trying to make a meal and you're thinking about some something for your job, something for your studies, things that you have to accomplish. You're trying to have a conversation with someone else in the house. There's all these things that, maybe without the last one, but there's all these things that maybe you're focused on, that's your world. And then you stub your toe. Your world went from the city and maybe even the country and all the things you were considering down to this. Your entire world is focused on this one sharp, painful thing. So maybe there's something about why he has arrows, that it's sharp. You're going through life and you think you know what you're going through life for, but there's a sharp refocus. Now my world is this. And it comes, like we said, from places you don't see it coming, right? It comes from out of the blue. Okay. So we're looking at the symbols to try to figure out the meaning. Here he is, the little stripling, while his bow he bends. Apollo doesn't understand it at all. To whom the son of Venus thus replied, Phoebus, thy shafts are sure on all beside, but mine, of Phoebus, mine the fame shall be of all thy conquests when I conquer thee. What's he saying? He's saying everything you've done, Apollo, the medicine, the symphonic orchestra, the Supreme Court, the imperial armies that are not maybe used in war, but are used for a sense of grandeur and stability, the gates and the soldiers and all of this stuff, that the higher structured civilizational thing that you made possible, that kept us safe from the dragons and safe from predation and safe from disease. All of those things, when people think of any of them, they're going to think about me instead of you, because I'm about to defeat you so badly that you're not even going to be remembered as the guy that brought any of those things into being. People will praise me. You slew Python, but I'm going to slay you. He said, and soaring swiftly winged his flight, nor stopped, but on Parnassus's airy height. Two different shafts. So he flies right up past the area that Apollo has created, that's higher and safer from the dragons. He flies right up there above him. And two different shafts he from his quiver draws. One to repel desire, one to cause. One shaft is pointed with refulgent gold to bribe the love and make the lover bold. One blunt and tipped with lead, whose base allay provokes disdain and drives desire away. Oh, okay. The bolted blunt against the nymph he dressed, but with the gold transfixed Apollo's breast. That's how we switch those. Okay. So it's because of Cupid that Daphne wants nothing to do with Apollo. But we said earlier that these are dream stories, so they have a plethora of explanations. And time, temporal and spatial restrictions don't apply in dreams. So like in this painting, we have Cupid over here, but we also have him over here, right? He can be in more places at once without somebody, being annoyed, because it's a painting. It's showing us one scene here and one scene there, and we're considering them both at the same time, right? It's like that. So the first version is we can take it literally and say, okay, Cupid has designed that Apollo will be brought low for making fun of him. Apollo, maybe because of what made him successful, is blind to something that is beyond what makes him successful. What makes him successful? Turning everything into a game, right? Cutting everything up into tiny little pieces and making sense and figuring out the points and building out of it. That's how he works. And with that, you can get legislative systems that are very sophisticated. You can get military structural balances of power where you're holding back the reins. You're not using the army, but you're establishing very highly complicated legal structures and military structures and medicine and science. It's all made possible by that ability to say, well, I'll stare at all this infinite chaos I don't understand and cut it into pieces and use a method and make the rules and figure it out. And then look, we've got medicine. Look, we've got symphonic orchestras. Look, we've got all this stuff. That's Apollo. But Apollo only knows how to think in that way. Love's not like that. That's what the story is telling us. Love's not like that. If you think, okay, I'm looking for a mate. Well, let me figure out what the rules are and what the points are, and I'll earn these points, and I'll have this system be right, and then that will force the person to have to love me that I want. I'll have my pick because I'll climb this ladder, and I'll if you think that people are like that, Cupid's about to bring you very low, the story tells us. And we've been emphasizing how high and great Apollo is because we're about to see really seriously just how low he falls. Okay. The enamored deity pursues the chase. The scornful damsel shuns his loathed embrace. We should really pull this painting up so we can zoom in, but you see him there in that figure. If you're on a full screen, maybe you can see it better. He's running through the woods chasing poor Daphne. Oh, there it is. In hunting beasts of prey, her youth employs, and Phoebe rivals in her rural joys. Okay? She's not interested in what's up the mountain. She doesn't give a damn. She's like, yeah, you and your 30 years of education and your big sophisticated, oh, the music, it's so great. Leave me alone. I live in the woods. That's my character, right? Daphne represents that she is the embodiment of a different principle that also matters. Well, we're about to find out how much. With naked neck she goes and shoulders bare, and with a fillet binds her flowing hair. By many suitors sought, she mocks their pains, and still her vowed virginity maintains. Impatient of a yoke, the name of bride, she shuns and hates the joys she never tried. On wilds and woods she fixes her desire, and nor knows what youth and kindly love inspire. Daphne, like Apollo's sister, wants to live life as a spotless maid, a chaste virgin. Diana is Apollo's sister, and she lives that life very well. She's the moon. The moon is chaste. That's Apollo's twin sister. Daphne, there are some hints that maybe she, like every character, is a yin and a yang, right? So she's real good. And we're about to see how good she is because she's going to change the world and she's going to put Apollo in his proper place, which is not an easy thing to do if he represents military might. This one hippie running bare through the woods is going to bring that mighty Apollo and all the good he's done, bring it down to its proper place. She's that hero, and we're going to read about her. But we've already seen a couple of hints that there's a tragic element to her character that is necessary for her to be this kind of hero, right? If Apollo's pulling against the chaos, well, the balance can go too far towards too much order and she has to pull back. That's a different kind of hero, and it's a tragic kind of hero. It's the Christ-like hero. It's the Socratic hero. And without giving too much away, that hero looks at the overconfident system that thinks it knows too much and says no to it. Straightforwardly says no to it. And the consequences are hemlock, crucifixion, poison, death. It accepts those consequences. It would rather say no and die than to submit. And by doing so, it conquers the world and changes everything forever. That's the promise of what this story is going to give us. We'll look more at Daphne throughout the story as we go. But she's there's something about her here where she's not interested in getting married, but she's also sort of terrified of orgasm, right? She knows not what youth and kindly love inspire. She shuns and hates the joys she never tried, right? She's like, look, I want to stay exactly like I am, and I'm not interested in, as much as I love the chaotic nature and I'm a part of it, I don't want to submit to the natural processes that would take me out of control, even in that, in childbirth and in orgasm, to be so out of control. And that's something she's a little bit terrified of. That's an important part of her character because it's what allows her to be the hero that we need, but it's a tragic hero. Her father, who's the god of Woodbrooks, right? Her father, that's why we started with that song, what's your name, who's your daddy, right? So her dad is the god of Woodbrooks. And he's going to play a role in this story. You see him in this painting. He's holding the jar, and out of it, the water is flowing, right? He's the god of this wood nymph. And he chides her oft. Thou owest, says he, a husband to thyself, a son to me. She, like a crime, abhors the nuptial bed. Okay, this is something she does not want to have anything to do with. So what does she do? She glows with blushes, and she hangs her head. Then casting round his neck her tender arms, soothes him with blandishment and filial charms, right? She does that thing that daughters at the age of 2 start figuring out without consciously knowing it, how to pull at the heartstrings of their dad, right? She tries to make him melt so that she can get away with not getting married. There's something of this dynamic that we're seeing here, right? Give me, my lord, she said, to live and die, a spotless maid, without the marriage tie. 'Tis but a small request. I beg no more than what Diana's father gave before. Right? Apollo's sister, she gets to live that way. How come I can't? The good old sire was softened to consent, but said her wish would prove her punishment. For so much youth and so much beauty joined, opposed the state which her desires designed. Okay, she wants this thing, and she means it, right? She's willing to say and do what she has to say no. Life is more than just reproducing and moving on, and she's going to make that point. And it's certainly more than just submitting to the guy that kicks butt and is the high up CEO in the pyramid of competence, right? Apollo's good. We've been pointing out how great he is. He's really good for certain things. It's all characterological, but he's really bad in other settings. And we're about to learn just how much, because Daphne's going to make that point. She's going to give up everything to make it for us. But her father has some wisdom and says, I don't think this ends well for you. And she sort of says, yeah, okay. Probably not. Probably this doesn't end well for me. But you know what? I know who I am. And who I am is this character. This is Socrates saying, bring the hemlock. Christ saying, take up your cross, because watch how I do it. Right? This is, okay, a point needs to be made here, and I'm going to make that goddamn point. And I don't care what it takes to do it. Sorry. Let's get back to stupid Apollo. Remember how great he was? We're about to see how pathetic he becomes in just a few lines of poetry. Cupid wasn't kidding when he said he was going to bring him low. The god of light aspiring to her bed, excuse me, hopes what he seeks with flattering fancies fed, and is by his own oracles misled. All right, in just a few hints, it's going to get much worse for Apollo, but in just 3 lines of poetry here, he's become a simp, and he's decided that if he just flatters her well enough, he'll get what he wants. And the god who has oracles is being fooled. He's so divine that you can't just say he's under a delusion. It's divine oracles are lying to him, are misleading him, his own oracles. And as in empty fields the stubble burns, or nightly travelers when day returns their useless torches on dry hedges throw, that catch the flames and kindle all the row, so burns the god, consuming in desire, and feeding in his breast a fruitless fire. This isn't going to end well for him. But his first fall from greatness is this simping attitude. That's a scene from a movie where this was depicted. Let's move on. Her well-turned neck he viewed, her neck was bare, and on her shoulders her disheveled hair. Oh, were it combed, said he, with what a grace would every waving curl become her face. We're saying that the art is telling us, get introduced to a person that exists. Apollo exists, and he's a type of person. And everything the artists depict over thousands of years, every painting of him in his chariot, he's holding the reins back. That's because he's about to learn the lesson that teaches him to do that. But in this line of poetry, he's chasing after Daphne, and he says, oh, how beautiful you are. Look at that hair that's not combed. If it were combed, right? He imposes order on the chaos. He thinks he's in love with Daphne, and the first thing he says is, let me set about making some alterations before we even have the naughty familiarity and intimacy that I'm hoping that we'll have with one another. He's already saying, like, oh, you're so beautiful. If I could just comb your hair, you'd be even more perfect. That's Apollo, the idiot. He viewed her eyes like heavenly lamps that shone. He viewed her lips, too sweet to view alone. Her tapered fingers and her panting breast. He praises all he sees, and for the rest, believes the beauties, yet unseen, are best. We're pausing to stare at these paintings here. Swift as the wind, the damsel fled away, nor did for these alluring speeches stay. So back to Daphne now. Let's start to understand her better. She's not, obviously, I mean, we could have predicted. She's not interested in him, and all of this flattery is not helping his case. And so she's not even listening, and she's just terrified and running away, which is quite sad. Stay, nymph. All right, back to Apollo. He gets worse. Stay, nymph, he cried. I follow not a foe. Thus from the lion trips the trembling doe. Thus from the wolf the frightened lamb removes. And from pursuing falcons, fearful doves. Thou shunst a God, and shunst a God that loves. All right, let's pause there for a second. First, he's flattering, and then he's trying to say how she could be improved before she's even interested in him, which she's not going to be. And then he starts saying, look, be careful. You might trip. You know, you're running away as if I'm mean and bad and horrible, but I'm not. I mean well, he thinks. This is horrifying. I mean, this is really horrifying. I don't know if I don't know if I have to underline it, but this is rightly horrifying. And great Apollo, who, by the way, had his pick of ladies. We've seen all of the paintings and sculptures, and for good reason, because he is that exact hero that he was, has now fallen 5 steps already down to a point where he's kind of demanding that someone love him because he's got good reasons or something. Let's see. Lest some thorn should pierce thy tender foot. That's not Daphne. Daphne loves running through the woods. Who is he talking to? He doesn't even know who he thinks he loves. He doesn't even know who she is. He's like, oh, you should be safe and secure. Your poor tender foot shouldn't be around thorns. That's who Daphne is. That's where she goes. Or thou shouldst fall in flying my pursuit. Beware, there's dangers out there. I've made it safe over here, but there's dangers out there. Beware, that's who he is. That's all he understands. To sharp, uneven ways, thy steps decline. For the first time in the story, Apollo actually sees Daphne. That's goddamn right. That's exactly who she is. To sharp, uneven ways, thy steps decline. Abate thy speed, and I will bait of mine. He's confused. He's a mess. He's pathetic. And he doesn't even know who he's talking to. But then he starts to get a glimpse of who she is just a tiny bit. I mean, he's an idiot. Oh, we should be adding. There we go. So sorry. All right, so now he hits on a new strategy. His fall has not quite been bad enough yet. I said Cupid was going to take this great one down, and Cupid meant what he said. Yet think from whom thou dost so rashly fly, nor basely born, nor shepherd's swain am I. Perhaps thou knowest not my superior state, and from that ignorance proceeds thy hate. Me, Claros, Delphi, Tenedos obey. These hands the Batarian scepter sway. The king of gods begot me. What shall be or is or ever was in fate I see. Mine is the invention of the charming lyre. Sweet notes and heavenly numbers I inspire. Sure is my bow, unerring is my dart. Let's stop. We've seen a new level of bad and horrible and terrible descent of the great Apollo by Cupid's design, falling into even worse places. Now he's thinking, I feel like you might be insulting me and not knowing why. Let me explain to you. I'm the man and you should love me. And here's how great I am. And so he starts going through these arguments to her. She's, of course, completely disinterested. To sharp, uneven ways, her steps decline. She doesn't give a shit about your numerical music. She doesn't care about Parnassus's airy height and all the muses and all that complicated, sophisticated stuff. She wants to be left alone, and she is going to manifest. She is the manifestation of the character that says, that is great, and it's insufficient, and it's not enough for me. And if you demand that I like it and I love it and I be a part of it, then fuck you, you've gone too far. That's what she is. Now, in his confusion and his stupidity, this god, it shouldn't have moved. Okay. His confusion and stupidity, he goes through simping and flattery and imposing his will on her, which she's not interested, by saying, I could make you even more beautiful, and not really seeing her, and then sort of getting a glimpse of her. And once he catches a glimpse of her, then he goes into this, wait a minute, I see you, you should love me. I got the arguments right here. And he starts listing out how great he is. And then he says this line, the last one we read. Sure is my bow, unerring is my dart. I'm sorry, hold on a second. Remember what he says to Cupid at the beginning. He says, why are you using a bow and arrow, buddy? I've got a bow and arrow. Feathered python hath met his fate, right? Apollo understands what he can do, and he understands what he is. And now he's praising himself to Daphne. But as he's confused and lost and foolish and really quite pathetic, stumbling through the woods after this nymph that wants nothing to do with him, he's listing out the things that make him great. He says, sure is my bow, unerring is my dart. And it brings him back, and he remembers. He catches a flash of how pathetic he's being. But more deadly his who pierced my heart. Right? He starts to notice, there is something higher than me. And I'm in this problem because I didn't recognize that before. He shakes it off. Medicine is mine. What herbs and simples grow in fields and forests, all their powers I know, and am the great physician called below. Alas, that fields and forests can afford no remedy to heal their lovesick lord. To cure the pains of love, no plant avails, and his own physic the physician fails. He's starting to even get a glimpse of just how pathetic he is, right? He's recognizing there's something higher than him, and he's starting to realize, my thing isn't really the answer for everything. There is no medicine in the woods that heals lovesickness, okay? The physician is failing to heal his own physic. He's starting to get the picture. Cupid had a point to make, and the point is starting a little bit to sink in here, but it's going to get worse for him before the end. Back to Daphne. She heard not half, so furiously she flies, and on her ear the imperfect accent dies. Fear gave her wings, and as she fled, the wind increasing spread her flowing hair behind and left her legs and thighs exposed to view, which made the god more eager to pursue. The god was young and was too hotly bent to lose his time in empty compliment, but led by love and furred with such a sight, impetuously pursued his near delight. He's a slave. He understood lust. He never understood love. Cupid's going to bring him down. The first and the fairest of his loves was she, whom not blind fortune, but the dire decree of angry Cupid forced him to desire. Daphne was her name, and Phineus her sire. As when the impatient greyhound slipped from far, bounds o'er the globe to course the fearful hare, she in her speed does all her safety lay, and he with double speed pursues the prey, or runs her at the sitting turn, and licks his chaps in vain, and blows upon the flick. She scapes, and for the neighboring covert strives, and gaining shelter doubts if yet she lives. So he says, look, just like a greyhound chasing a rabbit, the rabbit is terrified, and so it's motivated, and it changes direction, and it almost gets bit, and then the dog running twice as fast has to take longer to turn around, but the rabbit basically thinks, I'm already dead, and it's that terrifying. If little things with great we may compare, such was the god, and such the flying fair. She, urged by fear, her feet did swiftly move, but he more swiftly, who was urged by love. He gathers ground upon her in the chase, now breathes upon her hair with nearer pace, and just is fastening on the wished embrace. Should pause there. This doesn't seem like the Apollo we knew a second ago. The Apollo we saw a second ago, women, the feminine principles, the hours, the nymphs, the muses, the things that existed because he made the space possible for them to exist in confidence, knowing who they were, feeling safe and gathering and drawing near to him. He barely noticed them. He's always looking at something else in all those statues and paintings, but he's sort of the man in a lot of ways. And they rightly appreciate him because he was a hero, right? There is no good guy or bad guy. There are people, there are guys, and they're good for some things and they're bad for others. They're right in certain places and they're damaging in others. That's the way we read the stories. Get to know Apollo. Get to know Apollo. That's what the art is for. It says, get to know him. He's the proper thing when it comes to approaching Python, dragons, chaos, things. When the balance between order and chaos is too far towards chaos, you need to stare at what's terrifying and cut it into pieces and then reap the rewards. And you see it as that formulaic game. That's something you can understand, that you can internalize. Apollo is learning a lesson in this story, which means he is going to be a part of being up to this day. If he didn't learn this lesson, it would be over for him. But he's going to learn a really tough lesson, that there's something that flies above him, that there's a principle higher than that principle that he is. And that principle that he is not sufficient to solve everything. In fact, it brings about hell and fear and rape and death. It brings about totalitarianism if it goes too far. You have to hold back the reins. And so we're going to look at how in every painting for thousands of years, Apollo is straining in his musculature to pull back the reins because of what he learns in this moment. But he has to learn his lesson. And Cupid is not yet done fucking with him. He's not yet done bringing him down. He was so great mere a page or two ago, and he's gone through simping, and he's gone through demanding, and he's gone through arguing, and he's gone through negotiating, and he's gone through just layers of patheticness when he was the man. And now he's about to get even worse. Let's see. He gathers ground upon her. All right. So he's just about to actually, he thinks, I can convince you. I can show you. I can make the argument. I can prove to you that you should love me. He's a rapist. He's a monster. I mean, he's ugly as hell and stupid. And we're going to look closely at some of the statues here. We're going to see his face blinded by lust. And we're going to see just how right that is. But let's look at the poetry. Back to Daphne now, our Christ-like hero, our Socratic hero. Daphne, who says, I'm going to make this point that you need to learn. She's terrified. The nymph grew pale, and in a mortal fright, spent with the labor of so long a flight, and now despairing, cast a mournful look upon the streams of her paternal brook. Yeah, this is what I meant. You can look at his face here in this statue, right? Look at her. Look at her terror, her crying out. Something's not right here, right? To say the least. This is bad, right? Maybe we should just go back to dragons eating us. I mean, if he's this fucking bad, what do we need him here for? You know, but we do need him. We understand that we need him because we understood him as the other hero. So we're getting two characters at the same time, and they're opposite heroes. One says to the chaos, I will make you into order. The other says to the new order, you think you know everything, fuck you. No. I'll die before I'll submit to the idea that it's that fucking simple, that you can have it all that figured out. And that's who Daphne is. Oh, help, she cried, in this extremest need, if what are gods or deities indeed, gape earth, and this unhappy wretch entomb, or change my form, whence are all my sorrows come. We saw some glimpses of Daphne's psychology a little earlier. We're getting to know her character more. She's a tragic hero. There's something about her that's uncomfortable. As much as she loves nature, she doesn't really want to submit to it in the way that every generation before her did. She shuns the marriage bed. She's terrified of sex itself as well as of marriage. She doesn't want that. That's a part of her character that's necessary for her to be the hero that we need right now, because we'd be living in the Phaetonic totalitarian world if it was all Apollo all the time. So she has to be this principle. But her father warned her, this isn't going to end well for you. And she says, that's fine. I'll take the punishment. I demand I'm going to be the thing that makes this point. And now she's in a real bad place. And it's all because of this asshole, the one we thought so highly of just a moment ago. And she's in such a bad place, she wants to die. And she calls out to her father, the god of Woodbrooks. She says, if what are gods or deities indeed, gape earth, open it up, and this unhappy wretch entomb, I want to die, or change my form, whence all my sorrows come. She's uncomfortable with her femininity itself, right? She's like these fucking men, right? She's been casting off suitors her entire life, right? We saw that Apollo hit her with the lead-tipped arrow to make her not love Apollo, or that Cupid hit her with the lead-tipped arrow, blunt and lead, whose base allay provokes disdain and drives desire away. But the truth is, that's also her character. She's been doing this her entire life. She's felt like life is a torture because men are interested in her. She's uncomfortable with an aspect of being. There's a tragic hero element here. All right. But that's who she has to be. And it's so bad. It's so sad. So let's go back to that line one more time and we'll start reading again. Gape earth in this unhappy wretch entomb, or change my form whence all my sorrows come. Scarce had she finished when her feet she found, benumbed with cold and fastened to the ground. A filmy rind about her body grows. Her hair and leaves and arms extend to bows. Her hair to leaves and arms extend to bows. The nymph is all into a laurel gone. The smoothness of her skin remains alone. Ovid sees the universe and the cosmos as change. It's metamorphosis. And we now see the second change. Daphne loses her life. She becomes a tree instead. She is the laurel tree. She goes that far to say no to Apollo. Fuck you, dude. Well, Cupid's not done bringing Apollo down yet, so let's see. Yet Phoebus loves her still, and casting round her bowl his arms, some little warmth he found. The tree still panted in the unfinished part, not wholly vegetative, and heaved her heart. He fixed his lips upon the trembling rind. It swerved aside, and his embrace declined. Apollo has fallen from Parnassus's airy height, the place where he's made the world safe, where the higher muses can exist. All the good he's done in the world, he's fallen from there to dry humping a bush in the middle of the woods, looking for a little bit of human warmth and being declined. Cupid said, you're a bit arrogant, son, and I'm going to bring you low. And he did it. He really did it, right? He said, okay, there's something that flies higher than you and you don't get it. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you what you need to learn. And in just a very short amount of time, Apollo, as great as he was, this is who he is now. He went through simping and begging and demanding and arguing and negotiating anything to get Daphne. And she said, fuck you, no. She's the hero we needed in that moment so that we don't get the totalitarian solution that says, I've got it all figured out and you will submit. There's something more important here. Now, this is the best part of the story. And in order to tell the last 20 lines, we have to pause and mention the story we've been hinting at for a while. Apollo, in his greatness, not in this moment, in his other stories, he has a son named Phaeton. Apollo has a chariot, the artwork we've looked at of him holding back the reins, so confident, creating this good space. Apollo goes to the volcanic mountains and he has commissioned a chariot for his son made of gold and jewels. He gives the chariot to his son and he says, take not just this gift, but my advice as well. Thy art should be the holding back of the reins. Okay? We're going to turn the page and we're going to see that Apollo does learn his lesson here. And because of that, he's a necessary part. He's still a personality to deal with, but Phaeton doesn't. Phaeton, his son, uses the reins, of course, like a whip. He drives further and faster. He demands to get more because he knows and how powerful he is, and he comes to a very bad end. If Apollo represents, as we saw before, imperial, sophisticated, highly complicated civilizational structures like the Supreme Court and orchestral music and medicine and science and all the things that he is, if he's the way to get there by slaying the chaos and staring at what's unknown and at what's too terrifying until you can cut it into pieces and make order out of it, if he's that which knows to hold back the reins, his son is totalitarianism. His son is, no, I've got all the answers and you will fit into what I've decided the answers are. I have a total solution for everything, and human beings are the raw material to prove that my solution is best. Apollo is about to learn. He's been learning a tough lesson right now, but he's about to get the point where he's going to say, no, your art, if this is what you are, if you want to live and continue in a world where there are principles like love, human beings are there. Let's pause. Let's just see what happens. So he learns the lesson that you can't demand that human beings be there to prove that you're right, that everything you're doing is in service to the God, to a higher principle, to love, to humanity. Now, Cupid said, everything you've ever accomplished, people will praise me instead of you, Apollo, because of what's going to happen. So he fixed his lips upon the trembling rind. It swerved aside, and his embrace declined. And here's the hopeful part. To whom the god, because thou canst not be my mistress, I espouse thee for my tree. Be thou the prize of honor and renown, the deathless poet and the poem crown. Thou shalt the Roman festivals adorn, and after poets be by victors worn. Thou shalt returning Caesar's triumph grace, when pomp shall in a long procession pass, wreathed on the posts before this palace wait, and be the sacred guardian of the gates, secure from thunder and unharmed by Jove, unfading as the immortal powers above. And as the locks of Phoebus are unshorn, so shall perpetual green thy boughs adorn. Apollo says, fine, if I can't have you, then I'll marry you, and I'll marry no one else, and I'll be wedded to the service, protection, and devotion of this tree. And everything that I've ever done will be in service to this tree. So we're going to take some laurel branches. By the way, you can go to DC and you can go to the Supreme Court and you can look at documents that come from imperialistic Apollonian systems that shine like the justice of the sun, highly complicated systems. He says, look, on the spear that the soldier has, we're going to put a little laurel branch. And if Caesar comes back defending the outskirts of the empire, we're going to put a goddamn laurel crown around him. And when the poet or the rap battle artist wins the rap battle, we'll put a laurel wreath around his head, and we'll put laurel wreaths around the poem too. Every single thing, the gate, everything, we're going to put laurel branches on it to remind us that the reason for all of this is not to demand that people fit in with it, but to serve and push back against the sufferings of being. It's there to serve humanity, not to demand that it conform to what it wants or to prove that it's such a great system. Now, Apollo's learned his lesson. We don't have the marriage of Apollo and Daphne unless she consents. The grateful tree was pleased with what he said and shook the shady honors of her head. And we're done. So, Apollo, in all those paintings we looked at, pulling back on the reins, told his son, your art should be to pull back the reins. This is where he learned the lesson. This is where he said, I'm an important principle, but holy shit, I'm bad in another place, and there's some limits, and I'm not everything. And everything isn't a game that you cut into pieces, that love and humanity is higher than that. And if you think that humanity and love and these other principles aren't higher than that, and you go and you try to get a spouse or a sexual partner while thinking it's a game that you're going to figure out, the story tells us Cupid's about to bring you really, really low. And it doesn't matter if you're Apollo himself. It doesn't matter how accomplished you are in that game. You're about to learn a really tough lesson, because that's not how this shit works. Luckily, it's more complicated than that. There isn't a simple cheat code to life. It's important what Apollo does. We're not denying it. We're not negating it. But we're saying in its proper place. That's why he can't be on the throne. Zeus has to be on the throne, putting every one of these other deities in their proper place where they're good for something, and settling and keeping them back and pushing against them when they go in the wrong places. But even Zeus, Cupid flies higher than he does, as we saw in the statue. His thunderbolt is at Cupid's feet. Let's pull that up again. Let's pull that statue up again. Cupid. Let's see, share. Oh, are we sharing this or not? What am I sharing? Let's see, share this, add to stream. Here he is, man. Cupid the Conqueror, Cupid triumphant, like David, staring at his weapon, knowing how it works and knowing what it does. And what's at his feet? Mars's helmet, Zeus's thunderbolt. Behind him, Hercules' lion's coat, which is resting and leaning over, right? Or what's resting upon it, behind it, is Apollo's lyra, right? We can go right into the museum, and we can look at this statue. I'm going to say, here he is. Come on, clarify. Where are you? Here we go. Okay, here he is. And we'll come back. Apollo says, all right, man, you made your point. Here's my musical instrument. Here's my lyra. You've made your point. You've conquered me. I'm defeated. You know, it didn't seem possible. When we first read it, we saw he's killing Python, this monstrous thing that's too terrifying to look at. Apollo's so great and so great. It's like little baby stripling Cupid. You make fun of him for having a bow and arrow because you don't understand him, and he flies above you and you're not noticing it. But you make fun of him and he says, listen, buddy, Phoebus, everything you've ever done, people will remember me, not you. And at the end of the story, he says, let's put a laurel wreath on everything. Let's put it on everything I've ever done. Let's remind ourselves constantly not to forget the point that we don't have it all figured out. I'm the guy that approaches too much chaos, cuts it into pieces, and makes order out of it. I don't have the right to say I've got it all figured out and everything has to fall in, because I don't. I'm not that big a principal. I'm useful in my place, but it's right for me to marry a tree and no one else, because I have to remember that constantly. Always, I have to pull back on the reins. And his son, the totalitarian, he comes to a very bad end because he doesn't remember that lesson and he won't take his father's advice. But you can look again at some of these statues or paintings of Apollo in his chariot. Every single one of them for thousands of years by every artist who got in touch with the principles of who this is and then gave us a form where we could see it. Every single one. Look at how sharply the reins are being pulled back. right? He's holding back. The horses clearly want to run more wild, but he is confident to pull them back. And he learned that lesson because of what happened with Daphne and Cupid. That's the only reason he's still around, why he's somebody that we still have to get to know and understand. We're not getting any of the paintings I wanted. Let's go look at here generally and see what we get. Okay. We'll figure this out. Here we go again. Is this the proper thing is sharing, I hope? Yeah, okay, good. All right, so let's look at his chariot again. Oh, here he is. Well, that's the one that doesn't. There's still reins that are taught, but let's go look at all of them because we saw so many earlier. Should just share the ones I collected. That might be a faster way to get it. Let's try this. There we go. I'll learn how to navigate this better as we go. Sorry. Oh, that's not the one we want. Let's try this one. This will be right. Okay. Here he is, holding back the reins. The horses are trying to run more wild. He's pulling them back with strained musculature. These were just general. Oh, there he is. Pulling, look, his arms pulled all the way back. Limited government, checks and balances, restraint, not a totalitarian solution. This thing is only good if it's kept in check. It's hell. It's hell if it's not kept in check. Look at his arm. This is where he learns that lesson. This is a silver tray. On the top of the tray is the depiction of Apollo slaying Python. But down here, the stem of the tray is Apollo embracing Daphne against her will while she transforms into a laurel branch, a laurel tree. Here's something that's shocking to me. It's the last thing we'll say. When Apollo says to Phaeton, take not just this gift, this chariot, but my advice as well. Thy art should be the holding back of the reins. He says, the poetry says, and he says to him, he says, if you forget this lesson, new fires will come into the world. Now, I don't know how the poet got that idea. In the medieval ages, we had kings and frontiers between different regimes and a balance of power. And maybe you'd have a little quarrel over this or that, but nobody was trying to have a totalitarian solution that everyone had to submit to. But in the last century, a couple dozen times, both communists and Nazis forgot the lesson that the first story, once we come into humanity level scope of the Metamorphosis, is here to tell us. They forgot that lesson. They said, I've got a total solution. We understand where everything should be. We're going to grind you up as the raw material. And as a direct result, nuclear fire, genocide, and Holocaust had to be either invented as terms or redefined in their meaning. I don't know how thousands of years ago the poet knew that. But he did know it. I mean, he said it. It seems right. I don't know how that can be. But this is the point of our course. We're going to try to unlock wisdom that we can only partially comprehend, and we're going to attempt to put propositional descriptors on it that we understand from the beginning, can't fully encapsulate it. Just this Apollo lesson applies to aesthetic pursuits like this as well, right? We're not going to say, oh, the story means this. Cut it into pieces. It means exactly this. This word means this, so just translate it. It's not like that. It's too profound to be comprehended fully. These are characters you're here to meet. You don't ever know your spouse well enough that she or he can't surprise you tomorrow. That's who you're meeting. You don't know your best friend that well. They can do things that can surprise you, or you wouldn't even see the reason to know them. You already have them downloadable. These characters, Apollo, Daphne, they require us to go back to them again and again and again, to stare at the images, to look at the statues, to get an idea of who these forces are, these personal forces that float above us as Cupid floats above them, these personal forces that don't die when we die, lust and rage that can possess us and make us look different and do things unlike what we intend on doing when we're not possessed by them. We're trying to understand who the forces that exist in the cosmos are, so that we can be oriented around them properly, maybe make the right sacrifices or propitiations, or at least be aware of their presence so that we don't come to a bad end by opposing them or being possessed by them, and they have their own historical wills. We might want to know what world we live in. And the mythopoetic approach says, know what world you live in by understanding relationally the world and yourself at one and the same time. Knowledge of yourself becomes knowledge of the world, and knowledge of the world is knowledge of yourself. Why? It's narrative. It's mythopoetic. It's characterological. You don't know one character until you know how they interact with another character. That's how you know the characters. So we're going to wrestle with and get to know these characters because they are in the world. Obviously, the principle that says, I dream of a thing that's higher and pristine and mowed grass and well ordered, and I'm going to slay the impossible chaos to comprehend science and approach that which is too scary to look at, to make that. Obviously that exists. It possesses people. It moves history forward. No single individual is that, except it be Apollo. So let's get to know him. And obviously he's a terror. He's a horror. He's a monster. His son Phaeton is a totalitarian despot that will set the world afire in new kinds of fire that never lived before. So obviously, thank God for Daphne. Thank God for her willingness to sacrifice everything to make the point that you shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that's all there is to this. There's a counterbalance force. In the dance between order and chaos, one hero pulls against chaos to bring us towards order that's better habitable. And the other hero says, like Socrates, like Christ, like Daphne, to the overconfident system of order, no, I won't submit to you. Go fuck yourself. I'll take death if that's what it takes to make the point that you're not everything. And in doing so, they change the world. The laurel branches are everywhere. You'll start to notice them. They're everywhere. And they're everywhere in the Supreme Court. They're everywhere in higher imperial military structures. They're everywhere in everything that Apollo did. There's laurel branches around the poetry, around the edicts, around the decrees. The laurel branches are there because everything Apollo did has to have the stamp of his wife, his tree wife, that he marries after he can no longer have her, because he's so fucking blind and stupid that Cupid has to beat him down into nothingness before he learns his lesson. But he does learn his lesson. Phaeton doesn't learn it, but Apollo does. And he says, fine. If I can't have you, I'll dedicate the rest of my life to serving you like a husband. Everything I do will be about you instead. And we're going to put your laurel branches on everything to remind us what it's all for. And that's the point of the story. So with that, we're done. And tomorrow we'll read the next story. And we'll pick up where we left off. I'm going to end the broadcast and we'll have an after show talk with people that are in the space but didn't want to be live and things like that. So see you tomorrow.